superlatives for the 2023 season. I want to put some stamps on some season predictions here. Clayton, you did a superlatives piece over the weekend. It was tremendous. I encourage you guys to head on over to thewolverine.com and check that out. But we're going to kind of go rapid fire with these. Give yourself a little bit of time to explain your pick, but we're going to start right off the top. Who is going to be the most valuable player on this team, Chris Ballas?
Offense or defense, or both, or either?
Overall,
Blake Corum. I think he will have a huge year again. I think when push comes to shove, he will have the ball when it matters in games that might be close, and there will be some of those that they're closer than expected. But to me, he's the guy. He came back for a reason. He came back to win a championship and to compete for the Heisman Trophy. I don't know if he'll get the ball enough to be there, but I can promise you that he's going to have a big year as long as he stays healthy.
I agree. I'm going with Blake Corum as well. He's elite of the elite, in college football. He's a top 5 player, in my opinion. And he might have just won the Heisman Trophy last year had he played against Ohio State and Purdue in the Big Ten championship game. So he's that type of talent. J.J. McCarthy would be my runner-up because of how important the position is, and because I think he's going to have a huge year too. But I got to go with Blake Corum.
Do you concur, Anthony?
I am going to make it. I'm gonna go with Clayton's runner-up. I'm going with J.J. McCarthy only because I think at the end of last season, and this is no disrespect to Blake Corum, but we saw that Michigan was kind of able to piece it together with not only the options they had at running back, but because I think J.J. McCarthy, to me, played his best football last season at the end of the year without Blake Corum on the field. So I'm going to go with J.J. McCarthy. I think so much I think that Blake Corum's presence and those guys in the running back room, the offensive line, that sets the floor of what this team can be. But I think what sets the ceiling of what this team can be, what we hope they'll be, a Big Ten champion, national title contender, is what they get out of the quarterback position. And whether you want to call it MVP or most indispensable player, I think the drop off from J.J. McCarthy to what's next is just that much larger than everyone else.
There you have it.
Let's go with offensive player of the year. It might be the same guy, it might be someone else, but Chris, offensive player of the year pick.
Blake Corum next, for all the reasons stated before. Do you concur, Clay?
I mean, I have to. Yeah, I don't know how he wouldn't be, but I'll go. I'll just throw out a couple other names. Zach Zinter, I think could be one of those types of guys. Because when Michigan gives their awards out, if you get MVP, I don't think you can win Offensive Player of the Year. So I'll say JJ if I have to, but some guys up front are going to be really, really important too.
And of course, I'll go the other way and say Blake Corum, simply for all the reasons that you guys stated. And listen, I know they're going to want to split up his workload a little bit if they can, but when push comes to shove, if they need to give Blake Corum 30 carries to win a game, that's what they're going to do. And I think that he's going to stay healthy. I think he'll put up those big numbers. And of the 3 guys that are, or 2 guys for sure, maybe 3 with Donovan Edwards, I think that he is Michigan's Heisman Trophy candidate this year. So let's flip on over to the other side of the ball where J.J. McCarthy and Blake Corum are not eligible to win an award. Well, that would be something if they could play both ways. Chris.
So you have both. So no one can say you were wrong when we look back at this, right?
Absolutely.
Because you have JJ and Blake. So it's kind of unfair.
Yeah.
True.
Just want to throw that out.
Well, I do say if we do defensive player of the year, I'm going to go with Chris Jenkins. And I you know what? I think that I think Will Johnson's going to be fantastic. I think Junior Colson's going to have a big year, but when it comes right down to it, I think Chris Jenkins, as they call him, the freak in the middle, is the guy who is going to take that next step. He's going to get to the quarterback a little bit more, and he is going to really improve in the run game with his 305 pounds. Mason Graham's fantastic too. I just think that Chris Jenkins right now adds a little bit more in terms of an interior pass rush, and as a leader, this guy has become fantastic. So it was funny listening to Jesse Minter say that he arrived as a goofy kid and was kind of goofy, but now he's gotten it together. And he admitted as much, when his family said, "Are you sure they made the right choice?" when he was named captain. Pretty funny, but I'm going to go with Chris.
I was really close to going with Chris. I'm going to go with Will Johnson, though. I think he's going to be the best player on the field when Michigan is on defense. And part of it, too, he's indispensable as well with, a lack of depth there at corner. Really not a ton of experience, including Will Johnson at the college level. But I think he's just going to be – he played his best football at the end of the year last year, too. I think he's going to build off that, if and when he's fully healthy. So I'm excited to see Will Johnson, and I'll pick him here.
Yeah, that's the interesting part of the Michigan's no-star defense is that you can go with so many guys. Man, gun to my head, and it's not maybe quite the same thing as what an NFL draft prospect list would be, but I think so highly of what Rod Moore brings to this defense. I think that he's instinctually maybe Michigan's best defensive player. He's always in the right place at the right time. Nobody watches as much film as he does. I believe he led the team in interceptions last year. He put on, I think, 12 or 13 pounds. So him being in the right place is going to also lead to some, bigger hits. He's going to pack more of a punch. I think Rod Moore has a good chance to lead the team in interceptions again, and he is my pick for Defensive Player of the Year. So we will go back to offense now, and this will be your breakout player on offense. So a number of directions you could go with this, Chris.
Great question. Man, there are so many options here. And you guys, everybody's named Colston Loveland in the football preview, and I understand that, but to me, he kind of broke out last year, right? And he wasn't. What do you have? A couple hundred yards receiving or something like that. But at the end of the year, he made huge catches in how many games down the stretch? The Big Ten championship game, Ohio State had a touchdown. So to me, he kind of broke out. I'm going to go with Tyler Morris at wide receiver. I think this is a kid who, as long as he's healthy and stays healthy, is going to have a really nice year there. So there's a lot of competition there, though, guys, at that receiver spot. And again, watch later in the week. We'll tell you about the young receivers that are really, really turning heads in that room. There's a lot of competition there.
I am going to go with Colston Loveland. He had less than 10 catches against Big Ten opponents last year. He made some big plays, but I think that, and there are different levels to breaking out. Mm-hmm. I think he's going to go from one of those guys who was a backup last year when other guys were healthy to an established starter. And I mean, everyone talks about him as, he could be one of the best of all time at Michigan. And Sharon Moore said, I think he could be the best in the country. And I know there's a great player down at Georgia, referring to Brock Bowers, who's, people say he should be in the Heisman conversation entering the season. So you keep hearing this talk. I think the hype is probably a little bit too much for Colston Loveland, but I do think he's going to have a really big year.
Yeah, it's interesting to kind of think about too, like what does constitute breakout year? A guy like, and this is my pick, Roman Wilson, has been on the field for the last 2 years. This is going to be his third year in a row where really he's basically a top 3 wide receiver 3 years in a row, given that Ronnie tore his ACL, Ronnie Bell in 2021. But for as much football as he's played, only 25 catches the last 2 years. Wouldn't be surprised if we see him double that number. Wouldn't be surprised if we saw them find more ways to get the ball in his hand, out of the backfield or with some of the gadget stuff we saw early last year. And the key to all that for him is going to be staying healthy. But, he wants that pressure. He switched to the number 1 jersey. I know that hasn't carried quite as much weight in the Jim Harbaugh era, but still an iconic jersey number at Michigan that comes with expectations. And I think that Roman Wilson is going to, maybe doesn't wind up being, a first team all Big Ten, but I think his best football is still very much ahead. So that's my pick there. Breakout on defense, Chris.
Breakout on defense. Man, you'd think I would have thought ahead here, right? Can you pick Josh Wallace? He wasn't here last year, so I don't know how you could call him a breakout player. Same with Ernest Hausman, who I think is going to have a big year. So, man, I'm going to go with Keon Sabb, I think. This is an interesting one to me. No, I'm not. Actually, I'm going to go with Derek Moore as your, on the outside. I'm hearing the good things about him as a pass rusher. I could put Josiah Stewart in there too. I think all those guys are going to contribute a lot. But in terms of guys who were here last year that I think are going to take a huge step forward, I think it's Derek Moore. I think this guy has all the tools to be an elite pass rusher. Now he's 20 pounds lighter. I think he's going to get off the line faster, get around guys, and he's still powerful, fellas, as we saw in the spring. So that would be my choice.
Yeah, number of different directions you can go here, but there are a lot of established guys back on defense. So kind of hard to find one. I think you have to look at the defensive line, and mine is also Derek Moore. Picked him in the our football preview magazine, and have no reason to believe now that he's not going to be that guy. May not lead the team in sacks, but I think he's going to be really, really good and be a mainstay in that rotation. So I'm going to go D Moore.
I don't know that his best football will necessarily come this year yet because it's still a work in progress, but my breakout guy is Kenneth Grant. I think that we are going to see him simply by virtue of being a guy that's 6'3" and whatever it is, 335 pounds. We're going to see him do some freaky things that men at that size should not be able to do, just on instinct and ability alone. And maybe it takes a while for him to round into the player he's ultimately going to be, but I think he's going to play a prominent role in that run stuffing defensive tackle rotation, and wouldn't be surprised to see him be one of the ascending players by the end of the year. Chris, you're going to maybe wish that I had led with this one with the last category, given all the guys you named, but your pick for newcomer of the year, whether it be a freshman or a transfer.
It's a tough one. On defense or offense or both? Either or?
Either or.
Yeah, I'm going to go with God, there are so many guys. I'm going to go with Josh Wallace. I just think that he fills a need at a key position, and I think that you're going to see him really eventually secure one of those cornerback positions. I do. And this is, I think Josiah Stewart's going to get to the quarterback quite a bit. I think Ernest Hausman is going to play a huge role on this team and going forward. I think he's got a chance to be a really, really good linebacker here. But I think Josh Wallace is early on the most
landed
important.
Some much needed help.
There you have it.
There's me.
It scared me.
There's you. That's like, Anthony, let me talk here. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that was for folks listening. We cut in with some video there, but regardless, I think I'm going to go with Josh Wallace, and I think you're going to see him on Saturday start out having a good game.
You know what I love? The Drake. You got to love the Drake. I'm going with Drake Nugent at the center spot for Michigan. I think first team All Big Ten type of guy. So I just think what they've done in the transfer portal, and we'll see how it plays out this year, but what they've done in the transfer portal, not only with the 9 guys this year that they brought in, which is probably the most ever in Michigan history or modern history, certainly under Jim Harbaugh, but at the center spot the last 2, with Olu winning the Outland and the Remington, and then Drake Nugent being who many people nationally believe is one of the top centers in college football, is incredible what Sharon Moore, Jim Harbaugh, all those guys have been able to do. So I'm going to go with Drake Nugent.
Yeah, he'll be my pick on offense. In fact, I would probably go 50-50 on that. I'd forgotten about the Drake. I was thinking about defense. And read what we wrote about him in last week's ITF, folks, if you have any doubts about what this guy is bringing to the table.
So you love the Drake?
Love the Drake.
And for all those reasons above, I would also say Drake Nugent. It seemed like early in camp there was I won't say narrative, it's just what was put out there that he was in competition for his job, but I've never really got the sense that would be the case. It certainly seems like things are trending heavily in his direction, and we should see him start at center on Saturday. I have 2 more quick ones, and then we'll get into questions. Offense or defense, doesn't matter, Chris. Best position group.
Man, again, running backs because of the Blake and Donovan Edwards, I think. Give you the Don. It's because of you've got a 1-2 punch there. Does it go beyond that? We'll find out. There are several guys vying for that number 3 job, but those 2 alone give you the star power that probably gives you the best running back duo in the country, at least one of them. So that's the one I would go with.
Yeah, I got running backs too. I know we've agreed a lot, but I don't even think it's close. I don't think there's one that would be in the conversation. Maybe offensive line you could throw in there, maybe quarterback if JJ becomes, some elite guy. And, but if we're taking full position group with including the depth, I mean, that running back room is stronger than it was a year ago because both those top 2 guys are back, but also way more deep than it was last season. You're not going to have to move a linebacker over to running back. He's already staying at running back, Khalil. But you have a bunch of other options behind them. So I got running back, and it's not close.
I think defensive line could be up there as well. I mean, they're arguably as the depth there and the potential star power too, if those guys live up to their potential. But I'm with you, Clay. It's running backs.
I'll say running backs, but I want to give some love to the Hogs up front too. I think that there's a chance. I don't think it's crazy to think that this could be maybe the best interior offensive line Michigan's had. I mean, we'll see. Last year's was pretty darn good. Need everyone to stay healthy, but Zinter is going to be a high draft pick. Keegan, I think, can get there if he stays healthy. And Drake Nugent, like you said, for all the reasons that we already discussed. So it's the running backs. You have maybe the two of the best pure offensive weapons in all America, but that's where we stand there. So last but not least, this is your last chance on the record. Well, maybe not on the record, but on the air for now. put a stamp on what you think will happen with Michigan this season. What will be the final result? So once January hits, once the dust is settled on this college football season, where will this Michigan team be?
11-1 and Big Ten champs is my pick. I think that they'll either win a tiebreaker or Penn State will have 2 losses, but Penn State will. That game at Penn State is the one that I'm chalking up as a loss. People get mad at me about it. It's kind of funny. It's a tough place to play. That's a very good football team, and it is so hard to win there, and it's hard to go through a season undefeated. That would be the most logical place if you're going to drop a game and late in the season. So that's my pick.
I got, not that this matters because you were looking at a guy who picked a team that ended up winning the Big Ten championship and going to the playoff to go 8-4 2 years ago. So I don't know much. It's very hard to do these predictions, but I got Michigan running the table. 12-0, 3 straight over Ohio State. I think that Penn State game is going to be a bloodbath. I think it's going to be a really hard fought win, probably lower scoring. I really like Penn State's defense, but I think they get through it. And the rest of the schedule is pretty easy. I mean, there could be some minor speed bumps, some turbulence along the way, but I got Michigan 12-0. So that's kind of scary, maybe, given my track record with predictions.
I have them doing the same. I think that this team is cut from a different cloth. It does feel like a continuation of last year. I think they're better than both Ohio State and Penn State where it counts. We'll see. I mean, that game at Penn State is going to be what Jim Harbaugh would term a football fight. I'm excited to watch it, but it could also be extremely physical, extremely ugly. But I do think that they'll get through the regular season again unscathed. I think that they will win a Big Ten championship, and when the college football playoff comes around, we'll see. I mean, there's just a lot of variables with who could get there. Would love to see them get to that last Monday night of the season and go from there, see who you face, see what happens. So I won't say natty or bust, but it's I do think it's Houston or bust for them.